Good evening, everybody. Yeah, welcome back. I had a little short break last week because, as you know, I celebrated my 50th show last week, the week before, rather, with Les Imgrund, which was a fantastic show talking about his wildlife photography. This week, very special guest has joined me from America. We're going to find out exactly where he is. It's Joseph Linashcke. Welcome, Joseph.
Thank you very much.
It's great to have you on the show after seeing you so many times on the TWIP show with Frederick, and obviously your other tutoring shows that you do when you were doing the Aperture series. Just give us an idea, Joseph. Whereabouts are you based?
I am in Ashland, Oregon. That's the Pacific Northwest of the United States, a great chunk of the country.
That's a lovely part of the country, from what I understand.
Yeah,
So
it's
let's
beautiful.
let's start off basically with regards to how did photography start for you all those years ago?
Yeah, it started many years ago. I actually got into photography when I was a little kid. My dad was into it very heavily. I think my dad might have even been a professional photographer if his father would have allowed it.
Oh, right,
um,
okay.
yeah, he was really into photography. I grew up with a dark room in the house. I'm always surrounded by cameras. I remember my dad getting out the big camera Mamiya
Yeah.
645 for special
Wow.
holiday portraits and things like that. But he did all his own processing and printing, and in fact, he was just out to visit and brought over a bunch of prints, old prints that he had made of me when I was a baby,
Yeah.
to just kind of hand off to me. It's pretty cool. But yeah, I was into it from the earliest days. There's a picture of me probably 5 or 6 years old with a little Instamatic in my hand, and I know that I got my first SLR, a Yashica FX7, when I was 7 years old. Wait, FX7,
So
FX3. Yashica
that's
FX something when I was 7 years old.
when you were seven.
Yeah.
Wow, that
That was
was
about
obviously
20
given
years
to you
ago
as a
now.
that was given to you as a present. I take it.
Yes, that
You
was
didn't
my
have you didn't have
dad's.
enough money to go and buy yourself.
Probably not. No, no. The
No.
first one that I
So,
bought would have been probably closer to high school age, and that was a Nikon N2020. I remember that one, the first autofocus Nikon camera.
now I'm not familiar with what the N2020 is. I'm familiar with Nikon cameras, but a 2020 that's a film camera that's got to be something like, God, I think we probably call that
Yep.
something like a 401 or a 501 over here. I'm not
Oh,
too
right. You would have had
sure.
different model numbers. Yeah.
Yeah, they're model
Yeah.
numbers.
There,
Yeah.
I have no idea.
No
But
idea.
yeah,
Was
that
it
would have been
autofocus camera?
that was the first autofocus camera. So that would have been,
Yeah.
I guess, early 90s, I think.
Yeah, I think there's probably something like a 301 or 401, but we digress on that. That's not to worry. So when you say you got involved with photography so early, which is quite amazing, really, was it purely photography, or were you a kid that wanted to get out and play on the sports field and that sort of thing at school?
I was never much of a sports kid. I mean, I played, little league soccer and baseball and things like that, but that was never my passion. I've always really enjoyed photography, and yeah, I was
Mm,
out shooting a lot. I'm stacks and stacks of boxes of slides coming back from the
yeah.
developer, and throughout, especially when I was in high school, and well, even in earlier school, middle school, and so on. I remember doing photo contests and being involved in things like that. But in high school, I was the class historian and yearbook photographer and photojournalist and basically anything
Yeah.
that required a camera in the hand.
I was going to say, were you involved with the school magazine and school sort of journalistic type work? Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. That's
yeah, I
a
did all
couple
of
of
that.
guys I spoke to did that sort of thing, which we never really did that over here for some reason. It was
Oh,
till
really?
mind you, I always wanted to get out on the football pitch, quite honestly. So there we go. That's the way it was for me. Um,
Fair enough.
so you mentioned about the Nikon that obviously came later, and you were very much inside. What you mentioned there, the transparencies and film. What was your preferred film at the time?
Ooh, Kodachrome 64, and then the
Yeah,
Velvia when that came out. I loved that. That
yeah,
was a fun one. But yeah, Kodachrome 64, and that was more skin tones, and
yeah.
shot a lot of people, especially doing stuff for the school. Shot a lot of people. So, and I pretty much always shot chrome, shot positives. I remember, obviously, I did some negative film for printing and so on, but the positives were more useful for the school. We did big
Yeah,
slideshows, and then whatever the process they used back then to convert them into a negative, so you could put them in yearbooks and things like that.
yeah,
But a
that's
lot of the
right.
work was on slides originally, and I
With
remember
with
back then really enjoying that because it was final. There was
yeah,
no manipulation in the darkroom, and it's not to say that you couldn't, but that was not the natural progression. You got a
it was
chrome, and it
very
was either right
finite,
or it
wasn't it?
wasn't.
Yeah, it was very finite as well, wasn't it? I remember print. Did you ever used to print Cibachromes from your Kodachromes?
In college, we did. In university, we had access to a color printer, but it wasn't a particularly good one. It wasn't the kind of thing that we
No.
really did much with. I spent a lot of time in the darkroom doing black and whites, but we
Yeah.
didn't do that much color printing at all.
Yeah. I remember you having a conversation with, I think it was with Frederick about film, and he's saying how finite it was with regards to, no, it's another discussion he had, it's just come to me. But when you were printing color and you were printing, especially from transparency, it's very finite tolerances with regards to the process in the darkroom, wasn't it?
Right, right, exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
printing color, in the darkroom, printing color isn't it's a machine, right?
Yeah.
You don't have the whole dodging and burning aspect of it, the manual crafting that you had with black and white. So that was a much more hands-on process.
Yeah.
I mean, my experience with printing color was, like I said, is very limited. But I remember the machine is basically you put it in and print came out. And if it wasn't right, you punched buttons and changed numbers and let it go through
Yeah.
again. But in the darkroom, you had that manual control. You could stick your hands in there and your little cutting out your little dodging and burning tools
That's
that
right.
you'd use, and making vignettes with your hands over the enlarger and all
Mm.
that very analog approach to it. That was that's where I spent my time.
Yeah,
You
that's
know.
that's the skill basically that the darkroom printers had at the time. We all talk about people like Ansel Adams and stuff like that, but a lot of the professional photographers that I'm aware of, like the likes of David Bailey and that, they would actual fact pass that skill on to someone else. That they were the photographer, and then that was passed on to a darkroom artist that knew how to
Sure.
dodge and burn correctly to create a quality print. It's
Right.
quite
Right.
interesting how things have changed, isn't it? Whereas now we're all basically so much involved with our photography, we want to do it all on the computer.
Right.
So basically, from up through to school and then high school, what did you choose? Did you go to college after high school?
Right. I did. That was Cal Poly San Luis Obispo in California, California
Yeah.
Polytechnic State University. That'd be the full name. In San Luis Obispo, San Luis Obispo is a small town about halfway between LA and San Francisco. And great university. Studied art and design there. The
Okay.
degree was art and design with a concentration in photography.
Mm.
And yeah, so
So you were right
that's
down
where
this route. There was no wavering. There was no sort of, I'm going to do English or technology or computer science. It was straight down photography and art.
it was straight down photography and art. And I remember applying to the universities in my last year of high school, getting ready to go off
Mm.
to school, go off to college, and sending out the applications. And I remember, I applied to every school in California basically that had a photography program, every state school,
Mhm.
and got accepted to every single one of them just instantly, without any other request. It's just, okay, you have good enough grades, you're into the art program.
Wow.
Except for Cal Poly. That was the only one that said, okay, you've passed the first stage. Now is the second stage, and which I guess it's been a while now, obviously, but I think the second stage was the portfolio. Maybe that was third, but eventually they wanted a portfolio. And then the final stage was an in-person meeting at the campus with the head of the department and an interview, if you will, with me and
Yeah.
with my parents. And I remember getting that first letter and going, wow, okay, so this school is actually serious about it. They actually want
Yeah.
to see my work. The other schools hadn't even seen my work. It's not like I had a website.
No.
This is in the early 90s, right? It's not no website.
No.
So unless I was going to show them a printed portfolio, they hadn't seen anything. So to be accepted at these schools without seeing my work, it was like, okay, this isn't a serious art program at all. And
Yeah.
it wasn't
Really.
art school. This is traditional university with an art program. I didn't want to go to art school. I wanted to go to a
Mm.
regular school. And anyway, so Cal Poly had that criteria, and so I went in and I made it through, and yeah, studied there. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that actually, because my son did exactly the same thing. He went to the university to study design technology, and only one university. Sorry, I'm right. One university asked to see work that he'd done outside of school. The others wanted to see what he'd done within the school curriculum. This
Mm-hmm.
one particular one, Loughborough University, wanted to see what he'd done outside. So all his watch designs and his other designs that he'd put together. They wanted to see that, and that counts for a lot, doesn't it? That shows that they're
Yeah,
really serious about that particular course that they're doing. Yeah, I know exactly where you're
yeah,
coming from
exactly.
there. So you get into your poly in California there, and we're right into. Are we approaching digital age here, or are we still a few years off?
So quite a few years off from digital cameras, at least of any quality.
Yeah.
I remember I worked at the college bookstore in the computer department when I was in university, and I remember we had the Apple QuickTake camera in there. So that
All
puts
right.
a date on things, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely ludicrously crappy digital camera, but the first of its kind, and
Mhm.
unbelievable for what it was. And Photoshop 1.0 was the time frame as well. That so quick take camera,
Yeah.
Photoshop 1.0. So things were just starting to get digital, just starting to get
Mhm.
interesting. And
Yeah.
it was because of that, kind of steering into digital. Excuse me. I started getting more and more interested in this whole digital art idea. And when I graduated, I had actually, at that point, I'd been doing photography for so long, and literally close to 20 years, I'd already been doing photography. And I was frankly a bit bored with it, which is, the irony of course, you go off to school to study something and you go, that was exciting. Now
Yeah,
I'm bored
exactly.
with
Yeah.
that. Now what?
Yeah.
But this whole digital imaging thing was getting very interesting and very cool. And so I started my career in that space. And the first job that I had was with a company that, well, you're old enough, you'll recognize Meta Tools, HSC software, old Kai's Power Tools,
Yeah.
plugins.
Yeah.
Yep. So that was my first job, was working for Kai, working in pressing CDs for shipping for the different products they were making.
Wow.
Got into that space, and that evolved into a probably close to a decade-long career of working in digital imaging and software, which eventually led
Me,
me through to Apple and then Aperture and so on.
yeah. Meanwhile, your photography in terms of taking photographs, is it just sort of waned a little bit? Has it just sort of calmed down and you're
Yeah, at that
concentrating on your
point,
career now?
I pretty much stopped shooting. I remember it was many years later when I really dusted off the Nikon cameras and ended up donating them, but
Mhm.
I barely shot at all at that point. I just got involved in digital tech and digital imaging, and everything was about the computer. And of course, like you said, focusing on your career and getting started in a whole new space, and had a lot to learn. So yeah, I
Yeah.
really wasn't doing much photography from how would it be the late 90s to that's late 2000s for about almost a decade. Well, no, it would be a good decade when I barely
Yeah.
did any photography at all.
So when actually did you switch from your employment into I the first time I came across you, Joseph, was when you were on the TWIP show and you were talking about Aperture,
Mhm.
the Apple editing software.
Sure.
Um, when did that switch take place?
So I was at Apple from 2001 to 2009. And
Okay,
while I was at Apple, we launched iPhoto. And when iPhoto
right.
came out, there were a few of us that saw that and thought, oh, this something like this for the professional market would be quite cool,
Yeah,
and started pushing and doing what we had to do. And it took a couple of years, but then eventually we got the project that eventually became Aperture greenlit, and we're able to work on that. So when Aperture started to go into development, that's when I re-engaged with photography. And it really
right.
started because we needed sample content. We needed photos for the development team to work with.
Sure.
And so I went to my boss and I said, you probably don't even know this, but I actually have a degree in photography. That was my background. So how about I get a camera and go out and do some pictures for the team? And so we bought gear, and I bought Canon, or the company bought Canon for me,
Mhm.
because we already had somebody on campus who was shooting Nikon. And I talked to him and he said, well, I'm doing Nikon. Why don't you do Canon if you don't care either way? And I
Yeah.
mean, everything had changed at that point, so I really didn't care which one I went. And so went Canon, and then got back into photography then. And it was a pretty quick transition of picking up that camera, firing a few frames, and then going, oh
Mhm.
yeah, I really
I've
like this,
missed
don't
this.
I?
Yeah. I assume really from a point of view of developing the program, it was good that one of you was using Nikon and one, or Nikon as you call it, and the other's using Canon. So you could guys meet at the end of the path, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that was the
Yeah.
idea, just to make sure that we had both sides
Yeah.
fairly represented. And it's not like we're the only two people shooting, but we're kind of two
No,
of the main guys that were
because I
producing
suppose
content for
really
the
at that time
development
of the
team.
day there was very few other major camera manufacturers around that
Sure.
were that much into digital that those two guys were at the moment.
True. True.
How
Especially
times
in
have
the
changed.
35 millimeter size
Yeah.
space. There was still medium format and so on, but that was a whole different ballgame.
Well, that's a whole different ballgame. And if memory serves me right, I don't think there was any medium format cameras around at that time that were producing sensors that size, were there?
It was, I mean, oh gosh, I'd have to look at the history books. I don't
Yeah.
remember exactly when the first big medium format digital, but remember there were medium/large format digital cameras for long before there were handheld
Oh, really? It's interesting.
DSLR type cameras, but they were scans. They were basically scanners. You'd set up a
Mhm.
4x5 or medium format size back on a camera, and these things cost like $50,000 or $100,000 or something. But you could only
Yeah.
photograph static objects because it was a line by line scan and quite slow.
Mhm.
So that was
so aperture
probably
really,
probably making like a 640 by 480 image. Who knows?
yeah. So basically, photography is now back in line now, but you're very much involved with the aperture development. And I always remember the discussions that you and Frederick used to have, because Frederick was Lightroom based and you were aperture, and it was a nice little banter between the two of you, which was the best one.
Yeah.
Now, from that, then your photography career, did that start to develop from there with regards to
Exactly.
your commercial work?
As I was shooting more and more for Apple, just for the product, I was getting more and more into it and enjoying it more and more, and realizing that this is, rediscovering my passion, I suppose you could say.
Yeah.
And a few years of that into it, and I started thinking, I really enjoy this. This is where my career originally was going to go, and maybe it's time to consider that again. And it took a number of years before all the stars were aligned, but I ended up leaving Apple in 2009 to go do photography full time, and that was when I launched my photography career, launched, whatever you want to call it. And at the same time, pretty much the same time, a little bit later, in the very beginning of 2010, is when I launched Aperture Expert. And that was because I had been, of course, involved with Aperture from the very beginning.
Exactly.
I was able to say, able to legitimately say that I knew Aperture. I was one of the people who knew Aperture in the world best. And I was able to build that site. And it turned into, it started off just as a place to sell an ebook that I had written. And it very quickly turned into a real business.
Yeah. And a very valuable one, because I remember a lot of people, friends of mine, were either Lightroom or Aperture. I was Lightroom side myself, but it's funny, isn't it, how you pick something up like a camera. You pick up a Nikon, you pick up a camera that fits your hand, you like it. Same what I felt when I first picked up the Fuji. And I think it's the same when you see something on the screen. Yeah, I know exactly where I'm going. It suits you, and it follows through. So it's not a question whether one was any better than the other. It's just what suited and was more comfortable, wasn't it? That was the
it was. And there's, as with any technology, especially in software, there's always leapfrogging. Aperture came out first, and then Lightroom followed quite shortly after. And I don't know if there's any truth to this, but what we had heard and what we had understood was that Adobe had actually developed Lightroom a year or two before that, but then shelved it. They didn't want to cannibalize the Photoshop sales.
Yeah, so I can understand that.
Yeah, once Aperture was released, Adobe went, oh, well, okay, I guess there is a market for this. We better do something. And dusted it off and released it. And I remember their public beta for it, which was probably a good 6 months before the actual 1.0 shipped, was quite soon after Aperture. I think within a year, less than a year, I believe, maybe even 6 months. And they had that public beta out. And it was really quite a, whoa, where did this come from? Quite a surprise.
Yeah, I know. I remember when it came out, actually, and that's when I started looking, because obviously up until then I was using Photoshop to do all my adjustments, so to speak. I wouldn't say major editing. And of course, when these tools became available, then of course you started to do more and more editing. And well, what you can do now on Lightroom is truly amazing from what I can see. I haven't got Lightroom 6 yet. I'm I'm hedging my bets at the moment because I'm waiting for it. There seem to be so many people having problems with certain aspects of it, so I'm just waiting for that to settle down before I plunge in and get the upgrade. It's a good time to go for a screen share, I think, actually, Joseph, because we're now, as you say, we're now talking about your photographic career, so it's a great time to show your work. Actual fact, I think one of the pages is open on your iPhoneography, which we'll quickly get back to.
It just cycles through.
Yeah, this is what I was doing.
You click on the you're in the iPhone gallery, so click on the portfolio link there. That'll take you to the top page.
That's right. Yeah, portfolio. And then let's look at. Tell you what.
Well, just leave it there. Leave it there on a portfolio. It'll start cycling photos.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'll just hide that.
At least that's the plan. There we go.
There we go. Got some travel photography.
Oh no, you're still in a gallery. Yeah, whatever. Go wherever you want to go.
Just click on that. It's doing travel now. Traveled quite a lot by the looks of things, Joseph.
Yeah. Enjoy travel quite a bit.
This is obviously China, Beijing Olympics.
Yeah, that was Beijing Olympics. That's right. Yeah, that's when I was still at Apple, so that was a project for them. But obviously, shoot, somewhere
just the changing rooms.
No, that'd be Sochi. No.
No, exactly. Yeah.
No, that's somewhere in Middle America.
Yeah.
Oh. Actually, I think that's New Mexico. That's in the United States, if you can believe that. That's in Tennessee.
Well, I'm blind. I was going to say, do you know, I saw this photograph earlier on, and I thought it was the Bourse in Paris called the Bourginat, which was the first Bourse that Napoleon built, where they used to trade the sheep and animals and cattle. So I was totally wrong on that one. Yeah. So I'm just clicking here as we go through some of your work on the.
That's Texas, the world's, I don't know, North America's biggest cross. That's Aboriginal man in Australia and Sydney. So yeah, the way that I got to do something about my gallery, the way that your web page is sized, it's just filling the picture. And so if you kind of resize the page a little bit, you'll get a probably more accurate view of some of them. But it's
see if I can zoom out a little bit.
They load up, they look decent. It's all good.
Yeah,
that's Hong Kong, that's India.
Yeah. So this work here is you're traveling. Is it commissioned work you're doing here?
No, most of the travel stuff is just personal.
Right.
That's my fun and relaxation, and just go out and enjoy photography type of work.
And when you're on these travel journeys, how long basically do you stay away on the trips?
You know, I've never done a trip that was is that true? Yeah, that's probably true. I don't think I've ever done a trip where I said I'm just going to this exotic location just to shoot. There's always something else. I have plenty of other reasons to travel, whether they're for clients or family or whatever the case may be. And obviously I always have my camera and I'm always shooting. And if you go somewhere beautiful, then clearly you're going to actually spend some time making some decent pictures. So that's Ljubljana in Slovenia. I'm always, I could be somewhere for a day. I could be somewhere for a month. It just depends on what's going on.
That's St. Paul's, London, isn't it?
No, that is Budapest.
Oh, wow. That looks so familiar to the St. Paul's Cathedral.
Does it?
They're amazing. Nice tattoos.
Yeah, that's Thailand.
So let's talk about now. We're going to, because the next subject on the list is to talk about the gear. What gear is majority of this work that you're showing here? Is this still Canon work?
There's definitely a mix. There's a lot of Canon work in here because these go back quite a few years. And then Olympus and then Panasonic cameras.
Yeah. Lovely street work from
hot day.
Hong Kong, Shanghai, China. So
yeah.
You didn't want to photograph.
I love shooting in Asia. Just love it.
Yeah. This is cool. Okay, let's go to another one because, as you say, I think we're stuck in the travel there. Let's see what.
There you go. Now you're on top. Now this will be a mix of them.
Mix of them going through.
Yeah.
So when you're going away on these trips, what's the sort of gear that you would take? And now I've got to be careful here because we're going to come to the basis of you changing systems. When you go away when you were going away with your Canon gear, what sort of equipment were you taking away with yourself?
Well, okay, so back then, the main body was a 1DS Mark III, and even though that was a massively huge camera, I loved the body, I loved the feel of it and the rigidity of it, and it was a very good camera. Weighed 16 pounds, but it was a very good camera. And I would travel with that, and quite often just one lens, a 50mm 1.2, very nice, very sharp, very shallow depth of field lens, and that became kind of my camera of choice to carry everywhere. But needless to say, that's a massive piece of gear, and you are obviously a photographer when you pull that thing out.
Yeah, exactly.
Did me very well while standing in monsoons in India and not having to worry about the gear, but it is a lot of weight to carry around. So yeah, I had the Canon gear that I had was the 1DS Mark III, a 5D Mark II. I've got an original 5D, and I think I still have a 20D in the shelf somewhere. But those were big, heavy gear, obviously.
Yeah.
But that was what I was carrying in the Canon days. So.
Okay. And now we switch to what we're going now with. You're now shooting with Panasonic. We'll talk a little bit more about this when we finish the screen share here. Now, what sort of equipment can you now take with the mirrorless system?
So clearly you can carry a lot more for a lot less weight.
Yeah, of course.
Or if you're just going to carry one piece of gear, then it's just a much smaller, lighter configuration. So I definitely enjoy that part of it. The GH4 is the top end camera from the Lumix lineup. And we should say too, just to put it out there, I'm sponsored by Panasonic. I'm a Lumix luminary, so I'm one of 12 photographers in the U.S. that are that represent Panasonic, represent the Lumix lineup, and carry the name the Luminary team. And so I am sponsored by them, so I do get gear from Panasonic. And we can happily talk about mirrorless technology and all the other manufacturers, because I think that there's just some insanely awesome gear out there today. They're all doing, all the non-major players, i.e. the Nikon and Canons, are just doing incredible work.
Exactly right. Yeah,
it's great to see.
I think what we'll do is we'll the fantastic imagery there, by the way, Joseph. Whether it is with a DSLR or whether it is with mirrorless, which I think really just goes to show how good the mirrorless systems are. It's an interesting point though that I wanted to ask you about, something which I've noticed some recent literature on. Mirrorless sales still don't seem to be grabbing the DSLR market. The DSLR market is still sort of out there, outstripping mirrorless sales, especially in America. Have you got any idea why?
It's just marketing. I think it's just this legacy idea that if you don't know anything about cameras, you're not a photographer. You're just a layman who wants to buy a better camera than what you're getting out of your iPhone. You just want something nicer. The majority of what you know the names Canon and Nikon. You know that that's what the big boys shoot with. And if you can get a Canon camera or Nikon camera for $400 or $500 for camera and for a body and a lens, or even someone just sent me a link to asking which one they should buy, and there was a Canon kit and a Nikon kit, and both of them were under $500, and both kits were a body and 2 zoom lenses. You know, you look at that and you think, well, it's got that name on it, so it's awesome. They may not even be thinking mirror versus mirrorless. That's doesn't even enter the picture. They're just shopping by brand recognition. And honestly, I think that the only reason that Canon and Nikon are making the sales that they are is brand recognition. The fact that they've been around for so long, and their name means something. You know, their name means quality. Unfortunately, the name doesn't mean innovation anymore, but people they don't know that yet. And that's what's taking time.
You've hit the nail on the head there, because you're talking innovation, and that's exactly where I think you see these incremental changes which Nikon and Canon keep bringing out with their cameras. But then when you look at the Sonys, the Panasonics, and the Fujis, and all the other lists that's coming, even the Samsungs as well, which I think are basically probably considered a little bit of a sleeping giant. But those sort of cameras are coming out. They're coming out with the innovations, aren't they?
They are. They absolutely are. Yeah, the stuff that Canon just came out with, I don't remember what it's called now, some smaller camera, kind of an odd shape that's a smaller sensor. It's a 1-inch sensor, and they're talking about it being the next level, the whole end all be all mirrorless camera. And this thing's a joke.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Absolute joke compared to the latest from Olympus or Panasonic or Sony or Fuji. They're absolute joke cameras, and yet they're charging a premium for it, and they're banking on people not knowing that there's something else out there.
When I was a big Nikon user, as a lot of my viewers know, as I mentioned it before, I was really, really interested when the Nikon 1 system was being touted around. Then I noticed the sensor size, and I thought, this is really weird. But in terms of the camera itself and the results that I got from the 1-inch sensor, it was pretty good. You know, I was very, very surprised by it. But the only thing about it, that camera, I had the V1, was just a little bit too small in my hand. And then what with my D200, my D50, and all those lenses, and my Nikon 1 system, I had a bag on my back with just in case gear, as I would describe it. And that's when I switched out to, effectively, as I started off as 1 camera, 1 lens with the Fuji XE1. But this is it, isn't it? It's the innovations which are now bringing. You know, the Fuji, I think, have done something, although who makes the sensors? I think it's a Sony sensor inside it, but it's the sensor seems to have a bias towards what Velvia film used to be. So the landscapers love it. And then, of course, you got your Sonys that have really pushed it out with the full frame gear that they're producing. But the only thing I would say, and I think this is probably where the Panasonics and the Olympus with the 4/3 setup have got the advantage, is the lens stable. The lens stable which the 4/3 outfits have got, because they can pull together and use interchangeability between those systems, whereas Fuji building a very nice little set of lenses now, Sony still lagging behind. I think that's the problem with some of these mirrorless camera systems have at the moment.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, there are definitely a huge huge library of lenses. And as you pointed out, the Micro Four Thirds system is a, if you call it open source or whatever you call that system, but the lens mount is universal. So yeah, the Olympus lenses fit on the Panasonic bodies and vice versa. And I've even bought, I have these little plastic lenses. They're Lomography from lomography.com, these little plastic lenses that are Micro Four Thirds mount, and they're tiny and they're cheap and they have a look to them, and it's kind of fun and it's something different, but it's something that I could buy for like $70 or something. I got 3 lenses that just add to my camera bag, and it's just fun stuff to play with, and you don't have those kinds of choices with the other manufacturers.
I'm probably, this question is probably going to the a bit of an obvious question. You obviously haven't found any difference in quality in the image creation.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point. Let's talk on that, because when I was, you mentioned sensor size and the 1-inch sensor coming on the Nikon V1 that you had, and being surprised at that. I absolutely used to be a sensor snob, and when I was shooting Canon, I was Canon full frame, and anything less than full frame, not even worth considering. Wouldn't even think about it. And a friend of mine who kind of collects cameras was talking to me about mirrorless technology, and sent me, literally shipped me a bag of cameras to play with. There was a Fuji in there, there was an Olympus in there, something else anyway, but a bunch of smaller mirrorless cameras. And I didn't even take the Olympus out of the bag because it's Micro Four Thirds. It's such a small sensor. I'm like, I'm not, it's a joke. Come on, please. And I was playing with the other cameras, and the Fuji was very nice, and I think there's a Sony, whatever, is all very nice. And finally, he convinced me. I'm talking to him on the phone. He's like, you got to play with that Olympus. Just give it a shot. All right, fine. So I get out, start playing with it. And immediately, this is the OMD1, I think, or whatever. Or 5, right? OMD EM5. I think that's the model number. And playing with that, and going, this thing kind of rocks. The focus is insanely fast. Low light performance is great. It's, it feels good in my hands. It's easy to control. The touch screen everywhere. All this great technology, features galore. I'm like, I really like this thing. So when I shipped it all back to him, I went out and I bought one of those Olympus bodies, and a couple lenses to go with it, and started adding onto my lens collection for it, and was really enjoying it. And some of the lenses that I started buying were Panasonic, because hey, mix and match, and that's no problem.
Yeah.
And that's when I got introduced to the Panasonic cameras, and then started eventually talking to Panasonic, and of course that led to the luminary status. But point is that when I was playing with these cameras, and I first started playing with Micro Four Thirds, and just almost disregarded it out of hand. Once I started playing with it and realized, wow, this really is an excellent camera. Now, to answer the question of is it as good, undoubtedly there are going to be places where you're going to make the bigger sensor outperform the smaller sensor. There's no question. Low light is one of those areas where in extreme low light, those bigger sensors definitely have an advantage. But it's the right tool for the job. And are there situations where I might be able to get a better performance image out of a bigger sensor? Sure, I'll say that. That's I'll admit that. But on the other hand, are there places that I've been, or pictures that I've created, that I wouldn't have been able to create with a bigger, heavier, slower camera without the technology that I've got? 100%, absolutely. So as with anything, there's a bit of give and take. But the advantages that I gain out of the smaller, lighter, more nimble, more technologically advanced system far outweigh what I'm losing. And I've never looked at an image that I've shot and thought, oh, the quality isn't good enough, I can't do what I want to do. The GH4, especially, the files that you get out of the GH4 are spectacular. And I have done some extreme pushing of raw files out of the GH4 and been extremely pleased with the results. And no, I haven't put the two cameras side by side and tried to do the same thing. And, I leave that to companies like DxO Labs when they do those lens comparisons.
Exactly.
That's not my job. My job is to make images.
Yeah. Do you still print your work?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have a gallery show hanging right now that's
lovely. Okay,
prints all done on GH4.
Yeah, this is the point that I came to, actually, because there's a point, I think, where people will say, right, I want a very, very large print, and okay, A5, A4, A3, they're all within the parameters quite easily of what the mirrorless cameras can handle. Would you say that if you wanted to print bigger than A3, have you had a problem with your using your Panasonic?
Remind me what A3 is?
A3 is twice the size of A4, 290. So it's 584 by 420 by 297 in centimeters. That's around about. You're not used to that language, are you?
No. Okay, but it's twice A4 is it's like the 8.5 by 11, so twice that. That's going to be like a 16 by 20 print. Oh yeah, no problem.
Right, yeah.
Absolutely no problem. Yeah, I've got, like I said, the show that I have hanging now is 20 by 30 prints,
Right.
and the
Okay.
same print, yeah, the same print that I have 20 by 30 inch, uh, Panasonic printed to show at trade shows as 40 by 60. Yeah,
Yeah.
60 by 40 inch print. That's big.
Yeah, exactly. And
And it
I'm
looks
pleased you said
fine. It
that
looks
because
fantastic.
the reason why I asked that question, because I was talking to some guys that have, had their work shown on the Fuji stand at the recent London show in Birmingham in the UK, and they were talking about the size of prints that they were achieving with the 1.5 crop, which is what the Fuji sensor has, and
Mhm.
it is something I think which is the point is it's a tool for what you want to produce. If you are going to put your photograph straight on the internet, then you shouldn't really be worried about what sensor size you're going to be using. If you're going to be
Right.
printing, then you've got to start thinking about, right, okay, is the sensor going to handle to the size I want to print to? And the majority of are printing maximum size, as I term it, A3, which is as I say, well, it's you gave the size as 16 by 20, a little bit bigger than that. So I think
Yeah.
this is where we get it a little bit sort of deep into it. Yeah, bigger is better, but at the same time, I think it's a question of whether what you in actual fact are looking to achieve.
Right. Whether it's
When
really necessary, you're going to take advantage of that.
exactly right, exactly right. And you look today that there's so many wedding photographers out there now that are using mirrorless cameras because they don't want to be walking about with so many different lenses, heavy cameras.
Mhm.
The days are gone where they
Absolutely.
turned up with the Hasselblads and stuff like that and did that sort of work. So let's get to the nitty gritty with regards to our original love of Canon and Nikon. Why do you think they're slagging behind?
Resting on their laurels, arrogance, this head in the sand attitude that this mirrorless is a fad and it's going to go away.
Do you think they're
I mean,
holding on
that's
to
all I
the
can think
professional
of.
side of it? Yeah, exactly, because I can't work it out. Do you think they're holding on to the professionals that basically, at the moment, need the speed of focus and the need of, especially the sports photographer, need that? What's the word I'm looking for? The immediacy of an image take in a sports scenario.
I don't know. I think it's mostly legacy. Okay, if you want the really big long lenses, 600 millimeter f4 type of thing, then Canon and Nikon I think are your only choices. I don't think there's anything like that even on the Panasonic side. Um, if for speed and focusing for sports, yeah, those cameras have had an advantage, but that advantage is if it's not completely gone, it's nearly gone.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
don't do very much sports action type photography, so it's not really my bag of tricks to talk about. But I've played with it a little bit, and it's like I said, if it's not as good now, it's almost as good.
Yeah.
You can't talk frame rate. I mean, you can shoot 12, 15 frames a second on some of these cameras, so
Yeah, that's
it
right.
certainly isn't a frame rate issue.
No.
Uh, yeah, I think it's more legacy. You could probably put more abuse into a 1DX body than you can into a GH4 body. It's those things are built like tanks, but you know what? The GH4 body is extremely solid as well. It is a
Yeah, that's
solid
right.
chunk of metal under that casing.
This
It just doesn't weigh
GH4,
as much, and so there's a perception.
yeah, this GH4 has got 4K video, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
And is that in camera? Can you grab a shot from the 4K video in camera, or does
Oh,
it have to
absolutely.
go? Yeah. See, this is where I
Yeah,
think
it's
sports photography is going to go. I think they're going to use the 4K video. I want that shot, that shot, that shot, boom, and off it goes.
well, that's exactly it. If you
Yeah.
so the still frame out of a 4K feed is 8 megapixel. And
Yep.
8 megapixels sounds really low, but you know what? You can do an 8 by 10 print. You can print a cover of a
Exactly right.
magazine that was an 8 megapixel file. No
Yeah.
problem at all. So if that's your end result, and for
Yeah.
sports photography, that is your end result,
Mm.
or online, in which case, obviously it's going to be scaled way down from there anyway.
Yeah.
Then yeah, if you think about shooting 4K video, you're shooting 8 megapixel stills at 30 frames per second.
And I think this is something, I don't know whether the sports guys are overlooking it, but as soon as I saw that the Panasonic can do 4K video, I think the Sony can do 4K, but it has to go, you can't take the shot out of the in camera. You have to do it off camera on your computer.
Well, I
Is
think
that
you
right?
also have to add some other hardware. There's
Yeah.
some other thing you have to do to
Yeah.
get 4K. It's
It's
not
not
the
quite.
GH4. It's all in one. You're ready to go.
Yeah,
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 and
exactly.
even
Yeah.
I don't have it in here. It's out in the other room, but
Don't worry.
the LX100, the Lumix LX100 is a tiny little.
Yeah.
It actually looks like a little point and shoot camera, but
Yeah.
it's $1,000 camera. This is a professional level point and shoot camera. It's got the equivalent of about a 24-70 zoom lens in it. It's not interchangeable lens. You can't take the lens off. But it shoots 4K video. It shoots phenomenal 4K video. This isn't something I do sports with. It doesn't have that really fast focus for sports, but you can do the 4K video. You can extract the still frame from there, Wi-Fi it to your phone or to whatever directly from the camera. And that camera, it has what's essentially a leaf shutter in it. You can shoot any speed sync flash, a flash sync. I've tested it out shooting 4,000 and 8,000ths of a second flash sync with that little camra. That's so cool. So I've used that camera in the studio when I need that situation instead of the GH4.
Yeah.
It's like, it's just,
and that underlines exactly what we were talking about earlier on, innovation. The innovation is coming down from the mirrorless systems, manufacturers that are creating it. 4 years ago, I was at a presentation with Sony. They told me they were going to be #1 in the camera market. And well, I think they're pretty close to it. Although, as you say, we still got the legacy of Nikon and Canon. But the other manufacturers, Panasonic, Fuji, and as I say, Samsung, which I think personally is a little bit of a sleeping giant, I think we'll soon catch those big guys up. When you're going out shooting,
Sony may very well be #1 as far as revenue. When one thing you have to look at is they make all the sensors.
Well, so, exactly right. Exactly. Yeah,
they very well be #1. Just we don't realize it.
Yeah, they may well be. The only thing, as I said to you before, the thing that I personally think that lets Sony down is their lens stable. I don't think it's up anywhere close to probably even 50. So I think that's what lets them down. So if you're going out shooting with your GH4, what's your setup? What camera would you, what lens would you have on that?
So if I'm going out with the GH4, then I'm going out with a bag of stuff because I'm out shooting professionally, shooting for a client. So there's always going to be the 12 to 35 and 35 to 100. So that's the equivalent of a 24-70 and 70 to 200 mil lens, right? And those are fixed aperture 2.8 all the way through. So that's your 24 to 200 range with f2.8 fixed aperture and 2 lenses. And those are definitely your go-to. If you're only going to carry a little bit of gear and you want some range, that's where you'd go. In fact, I just helped a friend who wants to buy a new camera kit for a trip they're doing, and they're going to buy a GH4 and those 2 lenses, and they're going to fit into, where's my bag?
Small bag.
This is my Tenba switch bag. This is the medium-sized one, and this you can easily fit the GH4, 2 lenses. So that'd take about that much space. You've got room for, I don't know, a whole other camera in there if you wanted to, or a strobe, or extra lenses, and your iPad in the back. I mean, this tiny little bag, you can fit so much gear. So it's ridiculous. Now I'll carry, if I'm going out shooting, to finish the question, I will carry a bigger bag, slightly bigger bag, not much, that'll have that body and those lenses. I'll always have a couple bodies. So probably GX7 is, that's my normal kind of backup secondary body is the GX7. And then other lenses, I've got again, sponsored by Panasonic. So I do have a bag full of toys, but the 42.5 millimeter Nocticron, so it's an 85 mil f1.2 lens, is just an insane portrait lens. Absolutely beautiful lens. There's a 25 mil f1.4, so that's a 50 mil equivalent in there. There's a macro and the wide, the 7 to 14 millimeter, so that's a 14 to 28 equivalent. I use that for real estate. I do a bit of real estate photography, and that's great for that sort of thing.
Just a quick question on the real estate, because I was looking at that earlier on. Do you have any problems with the angulation of the images? Do you have to make any adjustments in the editing? Distortion, yeah, that's the word.
No, so I will. All right, so just a little kind of insight to the real estate photography market. It's crap.
Yeah,
there's no money in this market at all. Right, but if you can kind of get it down to a formula, and get it done quickly, then you can do it quickly enough to make it profitable enough to make it worth your while. And no one's getting rich doing it, but it can be done. And so what I'll do is I'll shoot with that 7 to 14 lens. The camera is of course on a tripod. And I'll shoot with the GH4. What's really cool, and all the Lumix cameras do this. I mean, even most cameras will do this. You can program your settings into a custom function, a custom setting. So like, you've got your after party, manual, shutter priority, and then there'll be a C1, C2 custom, right? So I have one of mine custom settings as my real estate setup. And so I don't have to screw around with the camera. I just dial it into C1 and boom, it's ready to go. And one of the things that it has is a spirit level inside of in the LCD, right? So I can see if it's straight, and there's vertical lines on there, so I can make sure all my lines are true. So the camera is as straight and as dead center as it can possibly be, and I get all my lines straight and then shoot it. And I shoot it with the in-camera HDR. So it fires off 3 frames and builds an HDR image for me, which for real estate is, any house with a window in it, it's pretty much required. It's expected. But processing that stuff manually later is a pain in the ass. So this is really quick and easy. And it's not the best HDR in the world, but it's real estate. It's good enough. All the HDR images that come out of the camera, I feel are a little green. So I've got a little color shift on it to push it a little bit, push a little more orange into it. And then the colors come out the way I want them to come out. And yeah, that's basically it. So I'll shoot everything that way. The only shot that I will do any treatment to, do any perspective correction to, is usually the hero image, which is going to be the outside of the house. And often there, you can't get perfectly straight. You have to tilt a little bit to get the whole house. Maybe you can't get far enough back, or whatever. There's a reason to have to do it. Or I'll shoot up high. I have a painter's pole with a 16-foot painter's pole with a camera attachment. Right. So I'll put the camera on there, get it 16 feet in the air, and then view the camera through my iPhone, because you can do that, right? So I'm seeing what the camera sees through the iPhone, and I'm just tilting the pole to get the shot, the frame the way I want, and then I'm firing it with the iPhone, and away we go. And that's the one shot.
With the camera being so high, you're reducing the vertical problem that you would have if you were using it lower down.
Reducing that, and you get a unique perspective on the house, almost an aerial view of the house.
Nice little cheat, that one, because I thought you were going to bring it back into your editing program and muck about with the verticals in the editing program itself.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. Let's go back with when we originally started talking before we came online. We wanted to talk about some interesting photos. We asked you to think about who your favorite photographer was. Do you have one? And secondly, who would that be?
Yeah, I mean, not one. I'm not going to pick any one favorite photographer, but
I like it when people come up with 2 or 3.
Yeah, well, there's of course there's lots of legendary photographers and all the famous ones that everybody knows, but I don't want to let's focus on some modern living working photographers, people who actually make a living doing what they're doing. So some of my inspiration there would be Vincent Laforet, and these are all personal friends who I was fortunate enough to meet through Apple. So they're not people that are just following. It's like, I know these guys. These are not just great photographers; they're great people. So Vincent Laforet is one. Mike Colon, wedding photographer down in Southern California. Bob Davis, he's a Chicago-based wedding photographer. He actually shot our wedding, so he's super photographer, really good friend. Kenny Kim, another wedding photographer. There are a lot of wedding photographers, even though that's not what I do. But there you go.
Now, let me just stop you there, Joseph. Why those 3 that you've mentioned there, and they're all wedding photographers? What is the reason for that? There's something.
Well, I was introduced to them when I was at Apple. They became part of during the early development of Aperture. They were consulted, and they kind of came into the fold a little bit. And I had nothing to do with their selection. I don't remember even how they were selected. Somebody who knew more people than I did just did that and brought them in. And those are people that I just became friends with. And they all do phenomenal work. Their work is all fantastic. And they're just, like I said, very nice people. And you can be the best photographer in the world, but if you're an ass, I'm
quite agree.
I'm not gonna have any respect for you.
Nice. No, exactly.
Those guys are just great. Zach Arias, he's another one. He wasn't part of the Apple thing, but I've met him along the ways, and and I can't call him a friend. He's someone I've met a couple of times, but he's incredible. And he's a great photographer, but also a great just a great worker. The stuff that he does, the stories that he tells of how he's gotten what he's gotten, it's incredible. And that's a man who's worked his butt off to get where he is.
No, I think he's a for want of a word, it can be bandied around quite a lot, especially by parents, and that he's a great role model for photographers on the basis of he went down the bad route. He really suffered for his time, but he got himself back on track, and I love his work. I think he's a great photographer.
And one more I'll throw out there, Joey L.
No, I don't know that photographer. No, I haven't. No.
Joey L, look him up. He's become quite famous, and he's an incredible photographer. Mostly portrait work and very high end portrait work. And he's a brilliant photographer. I'd say that I hate him because he's so young and successful. I've never met him in person, but he's just one of those you go, come on, really?
Oh,
you're like 19. Seriously? God.
Give me a chance.
Yeah, he's a great photographer.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. That's a great selection.
There's a lot of great photographers out there.
Yeah, there are. I know. Sometimes it's very, very difficult to to pinpoint one down, I don't really know. Jeff Curto was on my show a couple of weeks ago, and without a bat of an eyelid, he said Linashcke, famous French photographer from the turn of the century, and the 20th century, and others you speak to, they come up with 2 or 3 names. So it's really interesting to know how photographers look at other photographers and what work they really enjoy looking at. My personal favorite is Soul Lighter, but that's just in passing. So who's inspired you the most, Joseph? Who's been your inspiration? I think I know you're going to say, actually, but let's see.
I don't know. I know. Okay. No? Inspiration. People, this is ridiculous, but nothing to do with photography. People like Steve Jobs today. Elon Musk. I mean, the guy's incredible. That's, one inspiration. Look at him. Virgin. Richard Branson. I mean, that's somebody I read his biography many, many times in my younger years, just because the guy's insane. He's incredible. And people like that are the ones who inspire me. Photographers inspire me through their work. They're doing great photography. And I look and go, wow, okay, I want to do photos like that, or I want to learn something from you and your technique. But as far as overarching, doing something great, and the things that I'm doing aren't great in the sense of I'm not changing the world, but it's great for me and I feel good doing what I'm doing, and people like that are definitely an inspiration.
It's interesting you mentioned Richard Branson, because I was watching a documentary on Mike Oldfield, who was the Tubular Bells. And I couldn't believe it when, because that was the first album that really got Virgin going.
Yep.
And Richard Branson didn't like the music when he first heard it. He turned around and he said, "I don't like it." And the guy said, "No, you got to listen to it." And he listened again, and of course it went on, and then boom, that's it. They put the album. Cheers. He didn't like it when he first heard the first cut. Didn't like it at all. Mike Oldfield was, what have I got to go and do? It's amazing. But now there you go. It's an interesting inspiration, that where you look at those two, especially Steve Jobs as well, and the way that he changed, went back, and made such a big thing with the way Apple is as it is today. It's an absolute conglomerate, isn't it? Yeah, that's interesting. Joseph, I'd just like to say that it's come to the end of our time on the show. Thank you so much for joining me, hearing a little bit more of the background rather than just your knowledge of Aperture when we hear you talking to TWIP and the guys at TWIP, and obviously now with lynda.com, which we haven't really had a chance to talk about, but it's along those same sort of lines, isn't it, with the Aperture expert that you used to run with your tutorials?
Yeah, definitely. And there's on Lynda specifically, I have a few software courses, but the really successful stuff for me on Lynda is the live action photography training. So I have a photography 101. This is just full on basics. What's an aperture? What's a shutter speed? Type of course. And that's been very successful. It's quite a few years old now, but it's still my top earner on there. And then last year we did a photo 101 macro and photo 101 low light. And we're going to do a few more of those in the years to come. And there's a brand new series that I can't tell you what it is, because we're not supposed to announce what it is, but it's coming out this month, the end of this month. And that'll be a series instead of a course. So that'll be really cool to check out.
Yeah, no doubt you'll be on Frederick's show and you'll be able to tell us all about it. This development with LinkedIn, it hasn't changed anything with regards to lynda.com, has it?
No, not at all. And the hope and the expectation is it's going to be fantastic for all of us. Nobody knows. Well, not nobody, somebody knows, but we don't know. We, the little people, don't know what's going to happen. The merger or the acquisition, it makes sense. It took me a while to figure it out, but it does make sense when you consider that Lynda is all about training people the skills they don't have, and LinkedIn is all about helping people find new jobs, find new careers. Well, you can't find a new job or career if you don't have the skills for it. So it's clearly a perfect match. And again, I have no idea, but I would imagine that with a paid LinkedIn account, you would get a Lynda account, right? Something like that. And that to me makes perfect sense, which means that our viewership has the potential to go up exponentially. LinkedIn is so much bigger than Lynda was. So the potential exposure is enormous. We're all very excited to see what's happening with it. But we don't know. I
haven't studied lynda.com that much, but it's not just photography that they tutor in from, it's right across the board, isn't it?
It really is. Yeah, it started. I think the company's 20 years old, and they started with, I think, Photoshop training. Basic Photoshop and graphic stuff, sold on VHS tapes. That much I know. It was, the original ones were sold on VHS tapes, and but now, their training courses are all the graphic stuff. So any graphics program, Photoshop or After Effects and Premiere and Final Cut, and any visual graphic related thing, you're going to find training for it on there. But they also have things like spreadsheets and Excel and numbers and pages and Word and things like that. There's QuickBooks training, and then there's training for things like how to give a good interview, how to do basic marketing, social media things. It's growing quickly, and their library is massive. And it's definitely not just computer training. And for the,
and as you put the two,
I don't sound like a Linda ad, but for the for the $25 a month that it costs, it's outrageously cool.
Yeah, I think what you've just said there, in actual fact, just makes sense why these two firms have come together, and LinkedIn have bought lynda.com, and it just makes sense for the development of both firms. That's great. Thanks for clarifying on that, because I was interested when I heard you talking about it with Frederick and the guys. That's interesting. Joseph, once again, thank you so much for joining me this evening. I really do appreciate it. You still got the afternoon, I take it now, to go. Are you out working this afternoon, or are you spending time at home with family?
No, it's I've been screwing off all morning. It's time to get some work done.
That's great. That's great. I won't keep you any longer, but thank you so much. Thank you for anyone that the guys have been watching. We've had a few viewers, in actual fact, which is very good. Thank you so much for that. This show will be available on YouTube in around about 10 or 15 minutes if you missed any part of the show. And also you'll be able to do a catch up on the shows now. They're available on iTunes, as I'm steadily getting through loading those up. It's going to take me a little while, but I'll get there in the end. So don't worry about that. Just for me to say thanks again to Joseph for joining me. And if you're going out shooting over the weekend, leave your camera bag at home. All the best to you. Bye for now.